Welcome to the Deep Healing Podcast. I'm Jayanne, an energy healer who's obsessed with understanding how to break into the subconscious mind and create healing, lasting changes that bring peace to everyone around me. This podcast is brought to you by JayanneHealing.com. That's JayanneHealing.com and the Jayanne Healing Coursework. This is where you can find self-serve courses that can retrain your mind to do anything and get rid of that grinding pain and tension inside and find your peace.
As an empath, I'm often worried about the environment, and I know I'm not alone. This is because we as empaths can feel everything around us, including the distress of the natural world. This series on trees will give you the tools to understand the meaning of what these trees teach us, so you can heal the pain within yourself that's related to these concepts and start to take action if you need to. I got into my obsession with trees. I've always had an obsession with trees. My husband always makes fun of me because he says, I don't even notice I'm saying this, right? It's always, "Oh, what a beautiful tree," right? Just gotta touch your heart kind of moment. But I started feeling like I needed to share trees with you just the other day because, and it all started with a bug. Doesn't everything start with a bug? That's why it's bugging you. Yeah. So this is the time of year for the spotted lanternfly to be prolific in my area. And if you've never heard of the I can't say it because it triggers me, right? If you've never heard of the spotted lanternfly, good thing, because it's a very invasive species. It kills a lot of trees. And I was trying to dig into the meaning of this because whenever something pretty major is a theme in my life, I always go, okay, what is it I'm supposed to learn from this theme? So there's a time of my life where I was dissecting fruit flies, and I was like, for 2 years, I was just taking their brains out and putting them in a dish, right? I worked in a lab. And during that time, I was asking myself, like, what does that mean? And flies mean a lot, something similar to butterflies. It was a transformative time for me. And so part of my processing was mass killing these flies, which was like a bit of a struggle too, because it was like, what am I doing? But my porch is covered in these spotted lanternflies every day. It's like worse than the 17-year cicadas that we had last year. I don't know if for people who are on the East Coast, it's crazy, right? Like just so many cicadas. It's like that every year with the spotted lanternfly in my area. And it's a bug that eats a lot of trees, and it has multiple ways of bringing the trees down. And so I was looking, and it gets a favorite tree. It's called the Tree of Heaven, which is part of the series. It's not just the Tree of Heaven. They decimate grapevines. They love apple trees. The area where I live is the highest producer of apples on the East Coast. So to have a bug of this magnitude that can mess with the apples, that's very significant for my area. And then as I went down this rabbit, because I was like, what is a Tree of Heaven? And then I went down this rabbit trail of, okay, what else is going on? And in the Appalachian Mountains are the oldest mountain range. That's why everybody's, oh, they're like little hills. Yeah, because they've been around forever. And because they've been around, they've eroded and eroded. That's why they just look like little bumps instead of the Rockies, which are these impressive looking giant mountains. They're just very young mountains. And the Appalachian Mountains also share, so when the continents were all together, they shared the mountains of the Highlands in Scotland, and they also shared the mountains of I don't think there's any mountains in Ireland, but in those areas. And when the continents broke apart, then the Appalachians were here, and then there was like this little top part of the trail that was over there, or the mountain range that stayed behind. So interestingly enough, there's a lot of Scottish Irish who settled in the Appalachian Mountains, which is very interesting. I think it just felt like home. And there's a lot of the same trees there too. So I wanted to do a deep dive into trees in North America, especially in the Appalachian region, because I'm familiar with that. And there were actually several just massive extinctions and near extinctions in this area for trees. And there's a few that are still ongoing. So I wanted to highlight the trees that have been decimated, are continuing to be decimated. And it all came from this spotted lanternfly, which eats away at the trees and it bores into the trees, and the trees can handle it, but it's like death by a million paper cuts, right? And not only that, but this bug leaves behind something they call honeydew, which is like really sticky or whatever. And it creates mold because that's what eats sugar right away, right? If you've ever been told to go on a candida diet or a anti-mold diet, the first thing they tell you is not to eat sugar because sugar attracts mold. So it's a multifaceted takedown. And I don't, other than boring into the actual trees, this secondary effect of the mold is fairly significant because it can grow on the leaves of the trees, and the mold grows on the leaves and can block photosynthesis for the plant. And its favorite tree is called the tree of heaven, which is actually another invasive species. And so, yeah, each one of those trees that I researched, we're going to go into ash trees, we're going to go into hemlocks, the American chestnut. That one is really a sad story. The tree of heaven, because why is it here? Why is it invasive? What are invasive species meaning to us psychologically and for our collective unconsciousness? Apple trees, and then the elm tree. Ash, hemlock, chestnut, and elm currently chestnut's pretty much gone, right? It's already happened. It's over. It happened like 100 years ago. But the other three is an ongoing issue. And so I wanted to just bring to light what the collective unconscious is saying for this area and for people who live on the East Coast and near the Appalachian Mountains. And what does that mean for that area? And then that area also contains Washington, D.C. and a lot of people, right? So there may be greater impacts globally. But even if you're like, okay, this tree doesn't mean anything to me, it's a good exercise because you may be able to use some of the tools that I give you in the series to just understand yourself better and understand, okay, what are the trees in my area and how can I understand what that means for people near me? What does that mean what are the trees that were around when my ancestors were here or wherever they were? And what did those trees mean to my ancestors? And go and find the stories, because that is the way that we can do mass population healing, because I can do a session one-on-one with somebody, but it's not going to change the whole world, right? It's one brick at a time, of course. But if I can teach you how to learn from the trees in your area and the trees of your ancestors, then you're actually impacting many people, because more than one person has been touched by this tree. More than one person comes from your ancestor. When you do ancestral work on yourself and on your ancestors, it heals everyone in the line. So that's why I'm doing this session. That's how I got into it. And I would love if you just wanted to share it with somebody who just is really feeling like they need this kind of work. It's like super deep, and it's going to be hard to see like the immediate effects, but it's something that will really help you long term, and it's just like something that I find really cool. Enjoy, and thank you so much for watching.
Did you know that 90% of actions are unconscious? Help a friend or stranger find deep healing through this podcast and become more conscious by leaving a 5-star review wherever you are listening.